Imagine trying to have a private moment with your mother-in-law sleeping one bed away. No doors to close, no space to escape. Just a crowded room filled with family, snoring, whispering, shifting in their sleep, all under the same roof. In medieval times, intimacy didn't just mean physical touch. It meant quiet glances, stolen whispers, and shared routines. It had layers built on patience, timing, and silent understanding. There were no bedrooms to hide in, no locks to turn. Yet somehow, love still found its way. In this video, we'll uncover how couples managed to be close emotionally and physically in a world where privacy didn't exist. From shared beds to secret meeting spots, from cultural customs to clever workarounds, you'll discover how love adapted to survive the noise, the crowd, and the chaos of family life. Let's go back in time and see how couples made room for each other, even when there was no room at all. Most people today can close a door when they want space. But in the medieval world, doors often didn't lead to separate rooms because there were no separate rooms at all. The average home, especially for farmers and working families, was just a small, single-room cottage. Picture a simple wooden frame packed with straw and mud to keep out the wind, maybe one tiny window, and a low, thatched roof. Everything happened inside that one room: eating, sleeping, cooking, even caring. For animals during the cold months, families weren't small either. A household often included grandparents, young children, adult siblings, sometimes even aunts or uncles who had fallen on hard times. Everyone slept in the same space, usually on shared straw beds or wooden platforms, sometimes with only a thin cloth between bodies. Parents didn't have their own bedroom. Couples shared their sleeping space with whoever else needed a place to rest that night. Some families had a single bed for the parents, while children slept on benches or in corners. Poorer homes, everyone might share the same bedding entirely. There were no private corners, no walls to block sound, no place to whisper without someone else hearing. Every moment from rising in the morning to lying down at night happened in front of others. Physical privacy, as we know it today, was nearly impossible, yet people still found a way to live. They adapted to the lack of space, learned to be quiet when needed, and found comfort in closeness. Life was shared, for better or worse. And somehow, within that constant togetherness, couples still found ways to connect. Back then, the idea of privacy in marriage was completely different from what we expect today. In modern times, couples are used to having their own space, their own bedroom, time alone, moments that belong just to them. In the medieval world, that kind of privacy wasn't even imagined. It wasn't something people expected, and it definitely wasn't something built into their homes or their daily lives. Being surrounded by others wasn't considered strange. It was just how life worked. Emotions and physical closeness were also treated differently. While modern couples often keep their affection private, in the past, marriage itself was a public affair. From the wedding night to daily life afterward, a couple's relationship unfolded where others could see. In some places and social circles, wedding nights were even witnessed or confirmed by family members or local officials to make sure the marriage had been sealed. It may seem shocking to us now, but at that time, it was just part of the tradition. Marriage wasn't just between two people. It was between two families, even two communities. Everyone had a stake in it. Couples weren't expected to hide their relationship or keep it behind closed doors, because those doors didn't really exist. Their lives, emotions, and even disagreements played out openly, often with others nearby. It might sound uncomfortable now, but for them, it was normal. This openness didn't mean there was no intimacy. It just looked very different. People learned to express love, loyalty, and closeness in quiet gestures and shared routines right there in the middle of everything. With no walls to hide behind and so many people packed into a single space, couples had to rely on timing more than anything else. The nighttime became their quiet window for connection. When the day's chores were done and the cottage finally grew dark, most of the family would drift off to sleep, exhausted from work in the fields or around the home. That's when couples could share small, stolen moments, soft whispers under heavy blankets, fingers gently brushing in the dark, quiet breathing in sync. They learned to move carefully, to speak without words. Silence wasn't just polite, it was necessary. Even a creaking floorboard or a sharp breath could stir the room. So couples developed their own kind of language, built on gestures and timing, a hand squeeze, a glance, a certain way of pulling the blanket. These became the signals of closeness. Thick blankets helped create a bit of separation from the rest of the room, like a private world within a public space. The low glow of the fire would cast shadows, hiding more than it showed. In that flickering warmth, couples learned to be close without drawing attention. Their intimacy didn't depend on grand gestures or perfect surroundings. It grew quietly, in between the pauses of daily life, shaped by patience and a deep understanding that love could exist, even in whispers, even when everyone else was just a few feet away. Even in the quiet moments couples managed to find, there was another powerful force shaping their relationship, the church. In medieval times, religion was deeply woven into everyday life, including what happened in the bedroom. The church had a strong say in when and how couples were allowed to be intimate, and people took those teachings seriously. There were rules about what days were considered too holy for such closeness, like Sundays, saints' feast days, and periods of fasting such as Lent. On those days, intimacy was strictly off limits, no matter how much privacy a couple managed to find. This meant that the opportunities for closeness were already limited by space and timing, and now also by the calendar. A large part of the year was filled with religious observances, leaving fewer chances for couples to connect in that way. But at the same time, the church didn't see intimacy in marriage as something shameful. In fact, it was encouraged as long as it was between husband and wife, and with the purpose of strengthening the marriage or growing the family. Marital intimacy was seen as a duty, a way of honoring the bond that God had blessed. It wasn't supposed to be about desire or pleasure alone, but about unity and responsibility. So, even with all the restrictions, couples were reminded that closeness had a place in a faithful life. In a way, this gave their quiet moments of connection even more meaning, because they weren't just acts of affection. They were seen as part of a sacred partnership, carried out with care and purpose, even when the world around them was watching or listening. Even though couples had very little privacy, they did have something special called a marriage bed. This was usually the largest or most comfortable bed in the house, and it was meant for the husband and wife. But in real life, things didn't always work out that way. If a guest came to visit, if a family member fell ill, or if the household was especially poor, that bed could quickly turn into a shared space, not just for the couple, but for anyone who needed it. In many homes, it was normal for multiple people to sleep in the same bed. Children often curled up beside their parents, and visiting relatives might squeeze in as well. Even complete strangers, like traveling workers or pilgrims, could be offered space in someone's bed for the night, especially if there was no extra room or mattress to spare. Of course, this didn't mean couples had no boundaries. There were unspoken rules, an understanding that even if others were nearby, the couple's bond deserved some level of respect. People learned how to lie still, where not to look, when to stay quiet. These social habits helped protect a small sense of dignity within such close quarters, and couples, in turn, adapted their expectations. They cherished the rare times they had the bed to themselves, or found comfort in small gestures, a shared blanket, a quiet touch, a moment of eye contact in the early morning light. In those crowded sleeping arrangements, the marriage bed remained a symbol of connection, even when it was never truly theirs alone. Life was very different depending on who you were. For peasant couples living in the countryside, there simply wasn't a choice. Their homes were tiny, often just a single room shared by the entire family. So their intimacy had to be quiet, careful, and mostly hidden. They relied on moments of stillness at night or short bursts of privacy during the day, maybe when others were out working. They made the best of what little they had, keeping their connection alive through quiet touches and patient understanding. But things weren't completely private, even for the rich. Noble couples had bigger homes and separate sleeping chambers, which gave them more space. Yet, those rooms were rarely empty. Servants moved in and out constantly, tending fires, bringing food, preparing clothes, or simply standing by in case they were needed. Even in the bedchambers of the wealthy, a nobleman or woman was almost never truly alone. Every action was surrounded by watchful eyes and privacy, though more available than in peasant homes, was still far from complete. Even kings who ruled nations didn't enjoy total solitude. Their rooms were grand and filled with luxury, but they were also filled with people, advisors, guards, attendants, and maids. Still, their high status allowed them a little more. Freedom rules could be bent for them. They might send people away when they wished to be alone with their spouse. They had the power to create moments of intimacy on their own terms. But no matter the status, peasant or noble couples lived in a world where privacy was rare and connection had to be carved out carefully, no matter how grand the home or simple the cottage. Because homes were so crowded and privacy was so rare, many couples had to look beyond their own walls to find time alone. The outdoors became a quiet escape. Fields, barns, sheds, and forest paths weren't just places for work. They were often the only spots where couples could share a private moment away from watching eyes. These simple places became their hideaways, where they could whisper, laugh, or hold each other without interruption. Asterisk, a walk through the woods or a moment behind a haystack might be the only time they had to truly connect. Nature gave them shelter, the rustling leaves, the soft grass, the gentle hum of animals nearby, all helped to cover the sounds of their closeness. These surroundings were peaceful, far from the noise and busy life inside their homes. Even a short trip to gather firewood or tend to animals became a chance to sneak in a little time together. Asterisk. For many couples, the natural world wasn't just background scenery. It was part of their love story. Trees became silent witnesses, and the stars above saw more affection than any bedroom ever could. In a world where privacy was rare and space was shared, a quiet field or hidden path meant everything. It was where they could finally just be two people, not parents, not children, not workers, just a man and woman finding a moment to hold on to each other. Out in the fields or back at home, with so many people always around, couples quickly learned how to speak without using words. They had no choice. A quiet look or a small movement could carry more meaning than a whole conversation. Maybe was a soft touch on the arm while passing by, or a slight squeeze of the hand at the dinner table. Little signs that said, "I see you," or later, when it's safe. Over time, partners developed their own secret language, built from everyday moments. A certain way of adjusting a blanket, the tap of a foot, or even the way someone stood near the door could all mean something. It wasn't dramatic or loud. It was subtle, built from trust, and tuned over years of shared life. A glance across a room could say, "Let's meet outside," or "Be patient, I haven't forgotten you." These silent signals allowed couples to stay connected, even in full view of others. It was how love survived in a world where privacy didn't exist. Their understanding of each other became deep and instinctive. They didn't need words. They had memory, rhythm, and feeling. In that way, their bond became something stronger than just physical closeness. It was emotional, built on attention and care, practiced every day through quiet, meaningful gestures. In a world where many marriages were arranged and couples often didn't choose each other, intimacy had to grow slowly and differently. It wasn't always about physical closeness. It was about learning to live together, raising children side by side, sharing daily work, and facing every struggle as a team. Love wasn't always loud or passionate. Sometimes it was quiet and steady, built through years of effort and understanding. Couples became close by, depending on one another. A husband might carry the heavier load in the fields without being asked. A wife might patch up her husband's torn clothes without a word. Small actions meant more than big speeches. Showed care, they built trust. Over time, these gestures became their own kind of affection, the kind that didn't need to be said out loud, but was deeply felt. Their bond came from facing hard times together: sickness, hunger, loss, and uncertainty. Through it all, they leaned on each other. Their connection was shown in loyalty and endurance. Just staying together through every season and hardship was its own kind of love. And in that love, they found comfort. Even if their marriage began without romance, over time, deep emotional intimacy could grow. One built on shared burdens, quiet moments, and the strength of simply not giving up on each other. But sometimes, even that daily closeness wasn't possible. When husbands went off to war or traveled for trade, families were separated for weeks, months, or even years. These long absences tested relationships in different ways. Couples had to hold on to each other through memory and hope alone. The longing was real. It shaped their emotions and deepened their bond in surprising ways. Old letters from that time tell stories of deep love and missing someone with your whole heart. Husbands wrote about the sound of their wife's voice or the way she used to laugh. Wives shared how empty the house felt without them, how hard it was to sleep alone, and how they prayed for their safe return. These weren't just messages, they were lifelines. Even when words were simple, the feeling behind them ran deep. In those times apart, love wasn't about touch. It was about staying present in each other's thoughts. When couples reunited, the joy was powerful. After so much waiting, even a glance or the brush of a hand felt meaningful. They had been through separation, uncertainty, and fear, and still found their way back to each other. That distance, as hard as it was, often made them appreciate what they had even more. Absence didn't weaken their love. Sometimes it gave it space to grow stronger. After long days of work and worry, couples often found comfort in the soft moments before sleep. This was their quiet time, when the world slowed down and they could simply be together. With the children asleep and the fire burning low, they would lie close and talk in whispers, sharing small thoughts that couldn't be said during the noise of the day. These nighttime conversations built a special kind of closeness, full of trust and understanding. Music and storytelling also played a big part in their lives. A shared song or an old tale told by candlelight wasn't just entertainment. It was a way to bond, to laugh, and to feel connected. Sometimes couples sang to each other, softly, or repeated familiar stories passed down from their families. These moments helped them escape the harshness of the world outside and find something beautiful in each other, even in crowded homes. Those whispered stories and quiet songs made them feel like they were in their own world. The bed, for many, was more than a place to sleep or be physically close. It was the only space that belonged just to them, a small corner of life where they could be real, soft, and honest. Those late-night talks, the gentle hum of a lullaby, or a hand held under the blankets meant more than grand gestures ever could. Stillness of those whispered nights. Love found its voice, one that was calm, patient, and deeply felt. But even with all the effort to stay quiet and private, sometimes the thin walls, or lack of any walls at all, just couldn't hide everything. If a couple was accidentally caught in a private moment, the response wasn't always as dramatic. as we might expect today. In most cases, people simply pretended it didn't happen. There was a quiet understanding. What happened at night was left in the night. Embarrassment was real, but everyone knew that couples needed to be close, even in crowded homes. Families didn't talk about it openly, but they also didn't act shocked. It was just part of life. Children, growing up in these shared spaces, naturally learned about relationships, marriage, and even intimacy, not through lessons or books, but simply by living side by side with adults. It wasn't explained, but it also wasn't completely hidden. That quiet exposure helped shape how they understood love and marriage as they got older. The truth is, society back then didn't see intimacy as something dirty or secret. It was a part of daily life, even if it was unspoken. People accepted that closeness, both emotional and physical, was just another thread in the fabric of a family's life. So, when privacy was broken, it wasn't the end of the world. It was just a reminder that even in a small, crowded home, love still found its way, and people, for the most part, chose to look the other way and let it be. Over time, things slowly began to change. As some families grew wealthier, their homes started to look different. Instead of just one room where everything happened, cooking, sleeping, living, houses began to have separate areas. Walls were added. Furniture became more common. And eventually, something new appeared. The bedroom, a space meant just for sleeping and for couples to finally have privacy. This shift didn't happen overnight. For most people, the old way of living, everyone under one roof, sharing almost everything, remained the norm for many more years. But in towns and among the noble or merchant classes, you could start to see the idea of personal space taking root. Having your own room became a sign of status. A couple with a private bedroom had something rare, time alone without eyes watching or ears listening. Yet, even as homes changed, the way love was expressed didn't disappear. Before bedrooms and locked doors, couples found ways to grow close right in front of others, quietly, patiently, and often with great care. The evolution of private space gave people more freedom to express love physically, but it didn't replace the emotional strength that had already been built from years of shared struggle and togetherness. For centuries, love wasn't hidden behind closed doors. LIVED, out loud, in plain view, and it still managed to thrive. It might seem normal to us today to have our own bedroom, to close the door and enjoy a moment alone, but that's actually a very new idea in human history. The concept of privacy, especially the kind where each person or couple has a personal space, only really became common in the last couple of centuries. Before that, privacy was something very few could afford. It wasn't expected, and it definitely wasn't seen as a basic part of life. Back then, if you had a bed to yourself, or even a quiet corner, that was considered special. Most people lived in shared spaces, where everything was done together, from eating to sleeping. A thought of needing alone time or private moments wasn't something people grew up thinking they deserved. Instead, people learned to live around each other, adapt, and find quiet connection in the middle of daily life. What we now think of as normal, a bedroom, a locked door, a place to just be with your partner, would have felt like luxury to most couples in the past. It's easy to forget that what we take for granted today was once rare. Our expectations around love and space have been shaped by modern life, not by history. And remembering that helps us appreciate just how much effort and creativity people in the past put into simply being close to someone they love. So even in a world with no privacy, no quiet bedrooms, and no closed doors, couples still found a way to be close. Love didn't wait for the perfect moment or a peaceful room. It made space where there was none. Whether it was a whispered word under a shared blanket, a stolen glance while doing chores, or a quiet moment in the field away from home, intimacy always found a way to exist. It wasn't about grand gestures or private settings. It was about connection, the kind that builds through shared struggle, understanding, and small acts of care.